Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans, where we work hard and play hard on our little corner of land in Iowa. My husband and I were born and raised Old Order Mennonite, or horse and buggy Mennonite, as some refer to them as. And although we are no longer part of that culture or community, we are intentional about passing on the old-fashioned skills of our childhood to the next generation. Hello everyone, Ruth Ann Zimmerman here for Homesteading with the Zimmermans, and in today's YouTube video I'm going to be showing you 3 alternatives to store-bought cereal that our family uses and loves for breakfast. Breakfast is very hard for me to film because I always go to the barn and milk my cows and the kids make breakfast. And then the way our routine works is I come in the door and I take care of the milk, or the children that went with me to the barn. There's usually 2, sometimes 3 of them, depending on if our teenage son is working that morning or not. We come in, we take care of the milk, and by the time we've got the milk taken care of, the child whose chore it was to work in the kitchen that morning has breakfast ready and on the table, and we just come in and we sit down and we eat breakfast. So it was very hard for me to film breakfast. However, I have put some of the recipes in the description, and if I didn't share the recipe, I have shared the YouTube video where I make that dish. The other thing to note is my family and I, we are not big breakfast eaters. Even if we spend, an hour doing barn chores, and we're still not big breakfast eaters. And I think some of this is genetic. My dad was not a big breakfast eater. I could easily go until 10, 11 a.m. before I get hungry in the morning. So I always want to make sure that they have something in their tummies before they go to school. 2 things that I'm most conscious about: some protein and some carbs. Carbs to bring their blood sugar back up, and some protein to then balance that blood sugar and to keep their system, their metabolism working throughout the morning. So one of the things that I've learned as a mother is those younger members of the family that, are still sleeping a good 10 hours at night, and they're very active, not only, playing and learning, but also growing while they're sleeping. They will usually wake up hangry, like hungry and angry, but their blood sugar, because their blood sugar is so low, you almost can't get them to eat because they're just not in the mood. And what I've learned with those younger members of the family is they need to have a glass of milk. They need to have a nice rounded balance of protein and carbs and fat to get their day started. So oftentimes the little boys will have a glass or half a glass of milk before we head to the barn. If we don't, and their blood sugar remains low, chores do not go well. There's arguing and fighting and bickering, and I almost can't get them to function. So them having that glass of milk just stabilizes their blood sugar or brings their blood sugar up a little bit where they can function and they're no longer hungry and angry. So then when we come back to the house, then they'll have their real breakfast. The one thing that my family would eat every morning is cereal. They would eat store-bought cereal every morning without complaining. And it's been probably 10 years since we regularly had store-bought cereal in our cupboard for breakfast. Now we'll buy it sometimes for a special occasion, but it is not part of our regular diet. Number one, it's just full of junk and empty calories and flavor enhancers that are addictive. So I'm always looking for options options that give you the same crunch with the cold milk, and I'm always looking for ways to recreate the cereal option in a healthier fashion. So the first recipe that I'm going to show you is actually one that the family has learned to like, and it's very simple to make. It's a homemade cinnamon toast crunch. So to make this cereal, you're just going to use my buttery sourdough cracker recipe, and I'm going to link that one in the description for you, but I'll also walk you through the recipe here. So I'm making a double batch, which is 1.5 cups of sourdough discard, and 6 tablespoons of butter, and then 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And I always add a tiny bit of stevia just because my family we all have a sweet tooth, and you can't add sugar or honey or maple syrup because that'll make your crackers toast too quickly. So instead of adding any of the herbs or, savory additions that I would add when I'm making the buttery sourdough crackers, I'm just going to add a bit of stevia and mix it together really well. So because I'm making a double recipe, I am going to spread it out over 3 baking sheets covered in parchment paper. If you're only making a single recipe, you might be able to just use 1 baking sheet or 1.5. And I really like to use the pre-cut parchment paper because it somehow seems stronger than this cheap stuff on a roll. So the absolute hardest part about making this cereal is spreading your dough out onto the parchment paper. And quality parchment paper helps a lot. And after you've done this step, the rest is super easy. And personally, for me, I'd still rather use this recipe than any of the recipes that I've tried where you have to roll out your dough real thin. So after you've spread your sourdough mixture onto your baking sheets, you're going to sprinkle it generously with some cinnamon. And then after the cinnamon, you're going to add some granulated sugar. So next we are going to put them in a 350-degree oven, and we're going to set our timer for 10 minutes. So after 10 minutes, you are going to pull 1 sheet at a time out of the oven and score it. I use my pizza roller, my pizza cutter, and I score it a lot tinier than I would if these were my sourdough crackers. This is also a good time to taste some of those broken corners and see how they're coming along. So after you've scored all of your cereal, you're going to set your timer for another 15 minutes of baking. So when your cereal is done baking, you're just going to pull it off of the parchment paper and let it cool. Once it's cool, you are going to want to store it in an airtight container. This sourdough cinnamon toast crunch is a great alternative to store-bought cereals for those of us that really love our cereal for breakfast. Plus, with only 5 or 6 ingredients, you are eliminating a whole bunch of unnecessary and even addictive and harmful ingredients from your diet. So while we offer eggs as a choice for breakfast almost every morning of the week, and we sometimes offer a side of sausage or bacon or scrapple as well. It really does not take a lot of eggs to feed our family breakfast because there is quite a few of us that really would rather not eat eggs for breakfast. So very few of my family are fans of the traditional stovetop oatmeal, but we do love this baked oatmeal dish that we make, and I'm going to show you that recipe next. So I'm going to be making a double batch, but the recipe that I'll have linked, your printable recipe, will be for a single recipe of baked oatmeal that feeds 6 to 8 people. Mine is going to serve more like 10 to 16 people because we like to put the leftovers in the refrigerator and eat them as a cold cereal. So I'm going to be making mine the night before and put it in the refrigerator, and I'm going to start with you're going to start with 1/2 a cup of melted butter, and to that melted butter you're going to add 2 to 3 eggs, and then you can add anywhere from 1/2 to a whole cup of sugar. You could also use coconut sugar if you'd like, because that is a little gentler on your morning blood sugar levels. Then you're going to cream that butter, sugar, and eggs together. You're going to add 2 teaspoons of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of salt. You can even add some vanilla if you want to. So if I would have started out with a big enough dish, I would just mix everything in that dish. But because I ran out of room in my original dish, I'm now finishing the mixing in my 9x13 pan. And you're going to add your 3 cups of rolled oats and then your 1/2 cup of milk. You could add some fruit to this. My mom would always add some raisins, but my family just prefers to add their frozen fruit to their plate before they eat it. I do, however, always sprinkle some cinnamon on top. So your baked oatmeal would now be ready to go into a 350-degree oven for about 30 to 45 minutes. But I'm going to cover mine and put it in the refrigerator, and I will bake it in the morning. Come on, girl. So like I mentioned earlier, we like to make a large batch of this and then keep it in the refrigerator because it makes a very delicious cold dish as well. So here's a prime example of why we use a tablecloth for every meal, is because it catches all the crumbs, and rather than wiping those crumbs up and having to sweep my floor after every meal, we just wrap them up in the tablecloth and shake all the crumbs out for the dogs and the cats. And then we hang each tablecloth up again, and then we decide if we use it for another meal or if we get a clean one. The next recipe that I'm going to share with you is my granola recipe. And this is a recipe that my children learned to make on their own early on because it has a lot of complete recipes, like no fractions of cups, just whole cups. And I like to get my Rice Krispies from Azure Standard, but they have been out of Rice Krispies the last couple times I have ordered. So I've just been getting my Rice Krispies at Walmart. So right now we're measuring out the Rice Krispies, and I'm going to make sure that this recipe and all its variations are linked in the description for you. After the Rice Krispies, we're going to add our oats, and this makes a large family size recipe, like makes over a gallon of granola. And with Maxwell measuring that way, we're definitely going to have over a gallon. So next we're going to add our sugar. You can use brown sugar if you want. We like to use coconut sugar because it is gentler on our blood sugar, and since it is a breakfast food, we want to be careful not to spike our blood sugar too much because that just causes a very unstable blood sugar for the rest of the day. Next, we're going to add our walnuts. Sometimes I throw all the walnuts into a blender and blend them up real fine. But because Maxwell's making this and he likes the sensory input of manually chopping the walnuts, I'm allowing him to chop the 3 cups of walnuts that this recipe requires. And then we are going to add our cinnamon and stir all of these dry ingredients together. So next we are going to melt together our 2 cups of fat. Today I am using 1 cup of butter and 1 cup of tallow. I have successfully used all coconut oil, I have used all lard, I have used all tallow, I have used all butter, but my favorite is to mix 1 cup of butter with another form of fat. So then we're going to add our melted fat to our dry ingredients and stir it all around. And then we're going to pour it into my large roast pan, and we're going to put it into a 250-degree oven, and we're going to set our timer for 15 minutes, and we're going to stir it every 15 minutes. I put my granola into a large roast pan because it's easier for the kids to stir it without spilling it, and therefore it takes mine about 2 hours to toast to the point that we like it. But you could put it onto cookie sheets and cut down on the time that your granola needs to be in the oven. So that brings us to the end of this week's video. But before I sign off, I wanted to encourage you in a couple small ways. If you are just starting your cook from scratch journey, or if you are in the spot where it feels overwhelming. In last week's video, I gave a couple of tips on where to start if you're new to cooking from scratch. And so now I'm speaking to those of you that have started and are overwhelmed with the time that it takes and also the constant dishes that cooking from scratch creates. And my encouragement to you is don't give up. It is going to get better. Your time in the kitchen will You'll build on each recipe, and your confidence will make it seem less time consuming. And the more confident that you get, the less dishes that you will make, because you will learn that some recipes can actually be broken down to where you only use one dish. It's always one of my goals to use as few dishes as possible. So when I write my recipes, I'm writing them with the knowledge that most of us don't enjoy being stuck in the kitchen washing dishes a long time. So that's how I write my recipes, as simply as possible, so you have the fewest amount of dirty dishes as possible. And the other thing is, I don't exactly enjoy time in my kitchen either, so I'm always looking for shortcuts. However, when you consider the fact that the time that you're spending in the kitchen is saving you more money than you would spend on buying that dish. So let's say cereal, for instance. The 3 recipes that I shared today are made with minimal ingredients. So they save you a lot of money. And now your time is worth more because you've saved money. So you might as well use that time to save your money. So you have to value your time, and the nutrition that those dishes add to your family's diet is well worth your time. And with that, I'm going to sign off. I have plans to be back here next week. But you all know that next week is wedding week. So if you don't see me here next Saturday, you will know that I got swamped with wedding duties and didn't get a video made in time.